So, hi, Souvankham. Welcome to the Kenyon Review interview series. It's such a pleasure to have you here.
Hi, Misha. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
I just want to say congratulations on all the success that the book has had, especially like winning the Giller Prize. That's so huge. I was like rooting for you all the way. So I'm so glad that that thing happened.
I still can't believe it. These kinds of things are outside of you. And they are often felt in a public sphere. But because I've been at home and I've not gone anywhere, it just feels actually like it's been into the void.
Is that so? That's such an interesting thing, like what you said about how these things happen outside of ourselves. Like it's when you're in a crowd that you begin to realize. I think I'm paraphrasing something that you said before we started the interview. It's like when you're in a crowd, then you begin to realize that you've had success.
Mm-hmm.
And because you're not in that crowd and because you're still in that void, regardless of like what's going on in social media or like how people are talking about you or, winning that prize.
Yeah.
How does that feel? Does this sort of the success feel bittersweet because you are unable to share it, or does it sort of protect you in a way to continue to work? Like
both. It protects me in that I don't, it doesn't get to my head. I don't realize or become afraid of what that kind of visibility is creating for me or doing for me, or changing me. I and at the same time, it is bittersweet because I've been writing for a little over 2 decades, and these things like prizes, success, these things are outside of me. I can't control what people think of me, or their assessment of me. I can't do anything about that. The choices they make, what they like, they arrive with that long before the thing I made came into the world. And so it's nothing I can control. And so I try not to think of it.
you know what I think is so interesting about your answer. You're talking about or one of the interesting things is that you're talking about how you've been working for a little over 2 decades. I read somewhere that 23 years you've been writing.
Yeah.
And you've written books of poetry that have won prizes, but this sort of like winning the Giller and like being interviewed by the Paris Review or like having your work in the New Yorker and things like that, that's a whole different level, I imagine. And does it feel
nobody can say to me, where do I get your book? I don't have to explain because it is understood that when you write a book, it is in a bookstore or a library. You can get it anywhere and everywhere. And I don't have to explain anymore that what I do is, yes, in English.
Yeah, I mean, I love that. It's also tied to the book, right? So much of the book is about language, and I'll get to that in a minute. But I love what you just said, this that when you write something, it's in a store and it's sort of like in a library. So you don't have to tell people, look, you have to find this book on this website in the small press, or like this journal is where I've been published.
You have to, walk up 2 blocks is 2 blocks because it's only sold in that one place,
right.
And also with the Giller itself,
right?
People outside of the literary world understand or the idea or the meaning of $100,000 is something practical and real in the world that I don't need to explain.
Right, it's computable, right? Like in a way that sometimes when we say we're writers, they understand that and they don't. It's sort of
they think it's a passion, a hobby.
Unless you're writing Harry Potter or you're writing something that's like,
right.
Or
they ask, oh, well, why haven't I heard of you?
Yeah, right.
Like it's my fault.
Yes, that they have. But you know what? This also brings me to that idea of that you've been writing for 23 years. Do you think it's it's wonderful that the success has come now, as opposed to perhaps it coming earlier, that you've spent this much time.
Yeah, because I've lived and have been in such proximity to losing, to making work that is valuable in the world, but nobody picked it, or nobody, waved a wand and said, this is good. I had to determine that for myself. And I had to hold on to the joy and power that I thought was my art.
No, I mean, I've been thinking about this. I've been thinking about what it must have been like, especially since, we've talked about this already. You talking about like how sometimes we have to tell people you have to go to this particular place so that you can get my book, right? And also when, oh my God, I love this cover, by the way. I have to hold this book up. Like I've got 3 copies of this book in 3 different locations, but like when the book was coming out, the pandemic happened, right? And so many people, like it didn't matter like which company, like which book publishing company was taking out your book. Like a lot of people's sort of book tours got canceled, everything got put on hold. And I remember
actually the writers with big names, they were canceled. I was nobody, so I was not canceled.
Oh my gosh, I didn't know that. That's fascinating.
Yeah, like so the people who had a big name, a big audience, who could garner a big tour, they were canceled or postponed. But for someone like me who had no, I mean, I am not putting myself down or raising myself up, but a year ago I was thought to be, or how we would term, like not important. And so that is why the book continued, and it went through and it was published, and very few, and the language around what was happening to books and publishing was these events were postponed. That's the word that was used. And then later it became canceled.
Yeah.
And then the thing about publishing is that there's always a new season and they move on. And you only have this very narrow little time in which to be visible and noticed. And they moved on. But I was very lucky in that I did receive interviews in places like the Paris Review, reviews in the Washington Post, the New York Times. I guess perhaps in cancel or postponing the bigger names, there was room for someone who didn't have that kind of profile. And so there was space, perhaps.
But also like it's the testament to the writing. Like it's also the testament to writing. Like, I mean, I think about it like when Molly McCully Brown, who's a poet and essayist, and the other fellow for Kenyon Review, we were thinking about how could we contribute to this pandemic. And we thought about coming up with this project, like it, like honestly, it was something that our editor said, Nicole, and then we came up with this idea of like on books and their harbors. And we were looking around to like really like looking for writers that we wanted to promote. And I remember like your book, like it was word of mouth. I don't even remember how it was, but like I knew this was a great book. And I remember reaching out to you and you wrote us the most beautiful essay, like about, small publishing houses and also like what it means for someone like you to publish. And I,
that's where I come from. I come through and I come through the slush pile of small literary magazines and the small press in Canada. So it's not unusual for me to see how word of mouth works and the way that it spreads. And, sometimes it doesn't happen overnight, and it could be slow, but when people love things, they really do shout about it. And I made a thing that people were really excited about. And that really meant a lot to me to see it live in the world.
I know, I was going to say, like, there are moments in each of your stories. Like I've underlined this, like, I feel like I've underlined it in 3 different books and 3 different locations, but like, there's always this moment of truth in your stories. Like it's Maybe it's a mother, maybe it's a father, maybe they're all about families, right? Like every single story is about family, like, and family, it's intergenerational families. There'll be a line in a story which will be not just, it'll be true to the character, but it's also about the world.
Yeah.
And it's not just about a Laotian family, but also just about mothers in general, or grandmothers in general, or refugees in general, or immigrants in general. And every time I come across one of those lines, I have to stop. Like I had to take a moment. I had to like swallow back my tears, even though no one's watching me. And I think that's part of being an adult. Somehow you have to swallow instead of allowing yourself to fully like feel that emotion. But I would have to swallow back my tears and then just go on and be like, that's the thing that hit me. And I was just, my mind was blown when I was reading this, because the stories are short. A lot of them are short stories in the real sense of short stories. They're lean, they're pared back, but they're also so rich, and they're constantly like assailing you in a way that you just, I'm carrying them around me all the time. This is the thing. I think the work is just beautiful.
I just try to tell the truth. I know it's strange to say that or to do that through fiction. But when we read the news, or when we see things that are visible all the time, they don't always tell the truth about ourselves. Like, for example, someone said to me, Asian women are often docile and submissive. and I said, and to me, I was like, and they said, but in your stories, they are not. And
surprise.
Yeah, and then I said, and they were like, was this intentional? Did you design this? And I was like, no, that's ordinary to me.
Those are the women in our families, right?
Yeah,
Like that.
they run
That's what makes sense.
businesses. They say "f you" when they're mad. They are leaders in the community, and they're brave and they have courage. And they say things like, "I'll cut it off if you call me sexy one more time."
No, I agree. I love the example that you've given. Like fiction, in a way, fiction is about truth telling, but it just has that extra lens that allows you to tell the truth in a way that you can. Like I always think about, that's the thing, like you're a poet, right? Like I always think about poets. Poets are always telling the truth, but under the guise of form. Like form allows them, depending on the form that they choose, to tell certain kinds of truth.
You're absolutely right. In my poems, I write about things like the tree, the snow, the rain. And the thing about my poems that I never get asked is, your poem about the tree or the rain, the snow, is that taken from real life? because people know that the snow, the rain, a tree is real. But when they read, what I think is so funny is when they read my stories, and they're like, these are about Lao immigrants, and they're so feisty and loud and rambunctious. Is this taken from real life? What about these? Can you tell us what is, the true story behind the? And I laugh because they're really telling me they don't know.
They don't know. And perhaps that's the best thing, the fact that you don't know. And also fiction is supposed to do this thing, right? Where it's supposed to make you believe. The best kind of fiction is where you're like, you believe everything that's on the page. Except when it's a stereotype, because this is what you're battling, right? You're battling that idea of what Asian women are like.
Yeah.
And then it becomes a thing.
With the way in which people will pre-read me.
Yeah.
Like, reviews of my book have been about the trauma and the sadness, but or just a simple description of it being about refugees and immigrants. And I like to say all the time, I'm up to much more than that.
Of course you are. Like, I mean, the stories are, I mean, I'm from India. I've lived in the States for almost 11 years now. And
Yeah.
I'm on the path to immigration, right? Like, and my stories, the stories that I tell are probably very different from the ones that you're telling. But you know what's interesting is that I can find myself in these pages. I find myself all the time, and not just in the women. Like this line, just this whole paragraph kills me. And I'm sorry, I'm going to read your work out to you.
Okay.
That's the kind of, I just love it. So it's, my father did not grieve. He had done all of this lives, all of his, yeah, he had done all of this lives grieving when he became a refugee. To lose your love, to be abandoned by a wife was a thing of luxury even. It meant you were alive. It's like passages like this where I feel like in every story you have a moment like this where it's not just about the character, it's true to the character, but
Mhm.
it's true of just human experience. And as someone who's on the path to immigration,
Mhm.
and who has had a hellish of a year, because like my husband and I are trying to figure out immigration, we're trying to figure out a lot of stuff. We're from two different countries. You know, you don't get the green card. You might have to go back to your countries, and then how do you get
Right.
to live together?
How
How
do
do you
you
be
stay
together?
together?
How do you stay together? I remember reading this and just like stopping for a minute and like then swallowing back my tears, and then later on like weeping in the shower, because it's so true. It's like, how do you have time to grieve when
Yeah.
like when you lose a love, when you're actually trying to fight for your life, when you're trying to
Right.
fight for, you know, that moment. And I thought this thing captures the refugee experience, like the immigration experience, in the most human way possible.
To me, they are ordinary stories, and we don't get to see ourselves as ordinary, going to work, wanting a place to work, wanting to be someone's neighbor, being a mother, making difficult choices for your kids. Often when we see ourselves, we're often an incredible, impossible success that not everyone can achieve, or we're incredibly sad and traumatic. We never get to be ordinary. And you know, the ordinary is profound. And
I mean,
that's
you've
what
just taken my breath away. I'm so sorry. I have to say this, like you did, like it's just, I get exactly what you're talking about. In order for us to, if we are visible in any way, we have to be extraordinary. Like you cannot just be ordinary. And the
yes.
need to be ordinary, the want to be ordinary is just, it's like, it's always clawing at you, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. I was thinking in particular about somebody who wanted citizenship in France, and he had climbed several floors like Spider-Man to save a dangling baby, and only then did he get citizenship. And you know, I was thinking, wow, you know, I can't be ordinary. I can't want things like to have a home, to have friends, to have work. I have to climb up the side of a building. I have to prove that, not just that I'm a human being, but that I'm a great one. And the thing about my stories is that they don't prove that anyone in there is a human being. They assume, they know that people in the stories are human beings.
I know, just as the people in the stories from any dominant narrative are human beings. Thank you so much for also bringing up that French example, because I don't know if you read this in the news. If I'm not mistaken, like a lot of the frontline workers in France were offered citizenship because they were frontline workers. And that was a way to also get other immigrants to become frontline workers. And I'm always torn, because a part of me is like, this is great. Like, you know, anyways, in most countries, the frontline workers are immigrants, in like almost any country where there's immigration. But at least France made the incentive, like if you've done this work, if you've like been helping out with COVID, and then, so there's that
Well,
one,
look what
but it's a
you
double-edged,
have to risk.
yes,
You
because it's a
can't
double-edged
be
sword.
ordinary. Yeah.
Yeah, it's always, or a double-edged knife, you know, like it's that moment where you have this, and at the same time you also have, you have to be constantly proving, right? Like you have to be in service in a way that other people don't have to be when you're doing that.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to read out another section from your book, because this is just like, I've sort of underlined and underlined and underlined. I mean, there's this other line, which is like, he came from nothing, and to stand up anyway and to try for something. Well, if that wasn't courage, he wasn't sure what was. And I think about this a lot. I think about like almost all the characters here in these books, like the ones that we are rooting for, have come with nothing. You know, and just the idea that they go on every single day, that they try to live those ordinary lives is beautiful and evocatively captured in this book.
I know that experience from being a writer. I don't, I grew up in a home without books. Anytime I saw a bookshelf, I begged my parents to take a picture of me in front of it, because I thought of it the way we do of the things that we see when we're on vacation and we think we will never see it again. And I didn't know, and my parents didn't know anybody who was a writer or how to become one. But I don't know, I guess the thing that was my guide is that I didn't care. I didn't care what anyone else thought. I didn't care about what was set against me or what I couldn't do. I just wanted to write, and I felt like if you're a writer, you write. I don't think of writing as, I don't think about a lot of students, or when I visit or when I meet people, they always ask me about courage and confidence. And to me, I always ask, why do you need courage or confidence? Good work already carries that for you. When you read those words out loud to me, like that, yes, I made it, but I do not write with confidence or courage. I'm scared too, but I write with that. And then the work itself it lives outside of you, and it holds or has confidence and courage. But I myself don't have that.
I'm going to go quote this to my students on Tuesday, because this sort of encapsulates the experience of so many writers, right? Like we're not sure about what we're doing, but we're trying it anyways, because this is the only way we know how to tell the story that we're trying to tell. Or this is the only way we know how to sing, or this is the only way we know how to write a poem about the rain, or, about the snow. Like this is the only way we know how to do it. And I love that. I love that idea that it's the work that carries. It's the work that carries what we're trying to. In fact, like quite often we do the work and we don't even know what it's carrying. Like it's the reader who tells us what we're carrying, right? Okay, time for me to quote something else to you now, because this line, like I'm sort of like heartbroken by the way.
Oh, okay.
I'm heartbroken, and I feel like you took something away from me with this, and also gave me something back, just so we're clear. Like I'm a big fan, but I have to say this. So, hope was a terrible thing for her. It meant it wasn't there for you, whatever it was you were hoping for. I just remember reading this line and was like, why? Because now I have another understanding of the word hope. And it's just, it isn't, how when you're hoping for a thing, you may not have it, but you have that hope that keeps you alive. And I'm just curious about, this is the story about the brother and sister, right? Like the brother who's a boxer, and then he ends up like doing mani-pedis for his sister. And then there's this line, hope was a terrible thing for her. It meant it wasn't there for you, whatever it was you were hoping for. And how does that come to you, this moment, and it feels hopeless to me, but I'm hoping it isn't, right? Like I'm asking you to tell me it isn't.
It's not. I was thinking in particular of family who's hard on us, when we have naive dreams of wanting to write or something like that, or whatever it is, or that we can be ordinary. A parent or someone who really loves you will tell you not to have those kinds of dreams, because that has been their experience, and they don't want you to hope. Because hope, I personally think, I'm a practical person. I don't believe and I don't like hope. It doesn't feel like something that's real. Like to me, what's important to me is the imagination, even it's even before you can hope, you have to imagine it. You can't hope if you can't imagine it. So for me, above hope and above all else is imagination. I say all the time, I am asked, how do you become, what did your parents do that you became a writer? Even though they didn't encourage it. And I think about that a lot. And I think, well, my parents had an imagination. They told stories all the time. And the fact that, they left a country as refugees, they imagined a future. I don't think they hoped for a future. They imagined it and then they made it happen. Hope, I feel, is a feeling that I don't want to hold on to. I want to get rid of it because I want to have the thing that I hope for. And I feel imagination is more practical and real and more hopeful than hope itself.
Now that you've given this really brilliant answer, I can't hold that line against you, except it's always going to kill me. Like that line is always going to kill me. But
the other thing that, you understand as a reader, though, is that the sister has been disappointed, that somebody did something to her, that she is telling somebody that she loves not to hope. We know about, racism that lives outside of the home, but this is what racism looks like in a life, the way that you bring it into your core and your very being, and how it destroys your imagination and how it destroys the hope and the love and the people who you love, their ability to imagine, and in that story to imagine a real and ordinary love for themselves.
No, I mean, I totally understand that. And I also love like how these things are sort of interchanged. Like I love that the brother is the romantic here. Like he also, like we see so much, because this is sort of told from third person. So you're getting that omniscient moment happening here where there's the godlike presence of the writer, like if you, but we finally get the moment where the brother talks to her and he tells her like, I get it. Like, even if I'm not going to get it, I should be able to hope.
Yeah.
And then also like our godlike narrator is also telling us like, she doesn't have that. But I thought it was magnificent. Like the idea that he's, boxing is about the body and that he ends up sort of doing mani-pedis. There is a beautiful synchronicity in both of those jobs that he's had, the work that he's had. They're both brutal work.
We are often, we live in the work that we do, and we bring to that work who we are. Sure, he was not successful as a boxer, but he took everything that he knew that made him great, and he took it into another field, and it made him a star.
Yeah.
In a way that he couldn't be in the world of boxing. So maybe his dream failed there, but it lives in another form somewhere else.
I know, and I love there's that moment where the sister is telling him put on this tight t-shirt, and he's like, people are coming to see him, right? The women want to have this boxer holder. And so you have created this moment where you can almost like in my mind's eye, I could see how they open up the shop and suddenly there's this rush of people. Like, so he's getting the adulation that he didn't get, the screaming from the sidelines, and his sister who always screamed, he could always hear her voice.
It's also something we don't see women doing in stories. We don't see women objectifying a man, telling him, wear this tight shirt.
Wear this tight shirt.
It'll show
so we can make
muscles.
some money. So we can get some money. I feel like we're seeing more of that on television now. Like we're seeing like that there's and I think that's also one of the reasons this book is so interesting and important, because I think art's doing this interesting thing right now in various art forms where they're bleeding into each other. There's a movement, right? There's this it's sort of bleeding into each other, the things that we are interested in, the kinds of conversations that we're having right now. I'm going to like just tag back to a thing that you said, the stories that your parents told, because what I found fascinating about this book is that a lot of the stories are told to us. Like there are things happening, but there are also stories where you just get told, like the reader gets told what's happening. And I love that because it harkens back to this oral way of telling stories, like oral tradition of telling stories. And of course, like the received wisdom in the classes that I've sat at has been like show, don't tell. And I always think that's problematic because telling is as important as showing. And I was curious, like, did it come naturally to you, or was that also a choice? Because there's a good mix of both those things going on in this collection.
I don't believe in showing and not telling. I'm one of those students who says, well, what if telling is showing? What if telling can do it better? I think the act of telling is showing. The person who tells, the fact that they can tell it is the story itself. They lived to tell it. And we shouldn't, I just don't want to put rules or onto somebody's writing. I think a good writer, they break these rules. We're told not to repeat ourselves or not to use a cliche, but under or in the hands of somebody brilliant, none of those rules apply. Like, for example, I just read a novel called Clara and the Sun by Katsuo Ishiguro. And, I've seen the sun a million times, but for some reason, when I start that book, I forget that, I've seen it 43 years of my life every single day. And I see it through the eyes of that character. And I forget that I've seen it before, that it's been repeated, that it's been written about. He makes language feel so new and the world feels so new.
I think that's what writers do, right? Like I'm always telling my students this, that like I think poets do this. And that's the thing about this book. It's almost like, I know it's what you've talked about, and I have to go get that book and read it now. But I always think that poets refashion language for us, and they make us look at things that we've looked at before in a new way. And good writers, like brilliant writers, will do that for us, will make us look at something anew. And that's my thing about hope. Like this line that I took umbrage with, and I was also like, you're breaking my heart there, Souvankham. Like that was the thing, because it made me look at that idea of hope differently.
I had to break your heart, though.
Yes, you did. I get that.
To also see that, no, you will not break my heart.
Yeah. No, I completely understand that. No, I get it. Like, and also, I mean, I'm talking to you and you're telling me like how imagination comes before hope, and you're a practical writer. And I'm thinking in my head, I love, what you've just said to me. I'm like, it's one of the smartest ways to explain, like to make that difference, like what we need before we can hope, like what you need. Like, it's also like, it's the smartest way to explain when people tell you like you have to imagine where you need to be in order to get there.
Yeah.
And I can see, but also at the same time, lady, you're a writer, you're impractical. So for all your practicality, like, but it's like, yeah, you had to break my heart in order for it to like sort of come back together. And I think one of the things these stories do is I feel like I'm meeting, even though every story has a different set of characters, like I feel like I've met an entire family, like they're from the same family, like it's intergenerational. I know the grandmom. I love that story. Oh my God, that story. It's just, I was 70 when he was 32, and that's, this is one of the things I love about these stories is I never know where they're going. I feel like a lot of these stories surprise me with the endings. They are not where I imagine they will be. They sometimes end on such a quiet note. that I have to take a minute to realize that the story has come to an end. Or sometimes they end on a crescendo, that moment with the two women where they're hugging each other and crying. Like, I mean, she works in a chicken plant, right? And the wife of the foreman, like, has probably never noticed her. But in that moment, and I'm not giving anything away, whoever's watching this interview, I'm trying to keep it circumspect, but that moment, like that's a crescendo, like I feel like them crying together, or the end of the fact that, the 70-year-old woman will not acknowledge, now she's in her 80s, that she refuses to acknowledge her lover, who is like 32 years old. And like, I can never quite know where the stories are going to end. And it's both exhilarating and sort of just, it just, you know what, the entire collection takes my breath away. So tell me about your endings, like talk to me about your endings.
I want them to be brutal.
Yeah, I get that.
I want to break your heart, and I want you, when you close the book, to look up, to look away from, or to leave it for a moment and to go about into the real world and look for these people that you long to hear from again, to come across people like this and to read them in real life. Like, for example, if you have a child who has a school bus driver, I want you to ask, what is his name? I want you to take him aside and say, no, we don't form friendships like this in our country.
Yeah.
Like, that narrator in that story is incredibly brutal,
Yeah.
but what it does is that it puts the responsibility on the reader to see a person like that in real life, and to feel like they know them, and to not, just dismiss or see a school bus driver as somebody who's invisible, that drives your child to school for a great number of the year and you don't even know his name.
No, I think you succeed in that. And I feel like having read these characters, I'm curious now. Like when I see a yellow bus, definitely, like my reaction is like, oh my God, are you dying slowly inside because of what your wife is up to? Like, because you've come to, and it's so true, right? Like two people can go to a place together. They can start at the same place. They can arrive at a place and then splinter apart. And they can go in two different directions because their ideas of that place have changed, and because people don't talk to each other. And that's the most amazing thing about your book. Do you capture it without saying it? Like we're in so many people's heads, but nobody is talking to each other. No one is really talking to each other in that way. I mean, that story with the 70-year-old woman being in love with 32-year-old guy, like all the interesting bits, like I feel like the amount of talking he does in that story, first of all, it captures a lot of relationships when men do so much of the talking. But like, there's that part, but also all the things that are left unsaid. And that's what makes up that's what haunts me about that story, all the bits that aren't said. And it feels like,
I know in the beginning, people are a little taken aback about their age difference. And some giggle and some find themselves or criticize themselves for having uncomfortable feelings about their age. But to me, after the first paragraph, it becomes just a story about love.
Yep.
And the ways in which we fail each other at whatever age we are. That line where she says, I watched him with a sadness he couldn't see. So often we watch people fail us and we can't tell them because they have to own that failure. I wanted to write a love story where love isn't enough and it isn't everything. And and you don't have to get your love object for you to feel love as a thing that's profound. You can still have that feeling, even if you're alone, even if you walk away from it.
I know, and I think that's that bit, like that ending, it's brutal, but also it's affirming because she makes that choice, right? She makes the choice. She looks at him and she's like, she knows that he's not going to figure this out. He's about to make a mistake, like not a mistake for him, but he's going to make a mess of things. And she chooses to walk away from that. She chooses, she's like, all right, like this is my thing. And even that ending. Yeah. And I
How
thought that
often
was,
have we wasted our time and our love on people who we allow to make mistakes? And I want to write a rom-com or a story.
Yeah, that is definitely a rom-com. Souvankham. That's definitely a rom-com.
Where you say, no, not on my time.
Not on my time. Yeah, I love that moment. I think because you capture time in a way that it wouldn't have been possible if she had been younger.
Right.
There's also that great moment in the story where you realize she hasn't slept with anyone since she was 40 because her husband died.
Yeah.
And so she's waited all this time, and now, like, not that she's waiting, you know what I mean? Like, he's her neighbor, he's just moved. And I think that you encapsulate the urgency because he has time. He's 32 years old. He's got the time. He's going to figure some shit out in the next 2 or 3 decades that she doesn't have time for.
No.
And I think that,
so a question that arises for me is she 80? What if this was also a 32-year-old woman?
Yeah.
She has this wisdom and this choice, and that's the thing.
But that would be amazing if you were 32 and you had that wisdom and you had the choice. I appreciate that she's not 32, Souvankham, because I would have felt really shitty about the fact that I did not have that wisdom and that choice. But like,
women's experience and wisdom when they get older, it's used against them.
I agree.
And yes. I wanted a story where I say, use your wisdom, use your experience, let those be your guides. They're valuable, and you know what? They're also sexy.
Yes, they are. Like, I mean, I love that ending. Like, it was one of the endings where I was like, yes. Like, I had this moment where so much of she's both active and passive in an interesting way. She's active when she's on his lap, for example, favorite bits. Now, this is a bit rom-com.
What I think is funny is that reviewers often say that it is her sexual awakening. And I laugh at that, and I was like, no, it is his.
Yeah, that's it. That's exactly it. This is what I was like. She's active in the moments where I'm just like delightfully happy. And then she's passive because it's almost like it takes more out of a person to be emotionally there to show somebody how to grow, because you're raising a person in a way. If they aren't on the same level as you, you're raising them. And there can come a point where you just get emotional fatigue in a way that and that's the thing. It's the heartbreaking part that when you're growing up, no one tells you that love is sometimes not enough. And even if they tell you you are stupid with youth and you're arrogant, you're like, love is enough, and then you get older and you begin to realize, shit, sometimes, a lot of the times it's not enough. And that's the heartbreaking part about it. And I feel like all the stories carry an element of it because they are,
images. When we think about love, we think of love as a thing with other people.
Yeah.
But these are stories about self-love.
Yeah.
I want to be I'm not ashamed or humiliated or embarrassed to be Asian. As Sandra Oh says, it's a privilege to be Asian.
I agree.
And these are stories about people who want to hold on to the way they speak English or don't speak English. They're proud and they're happy and they love themselves.
And yeah, I mean, thank you for circling back to that, because language is such an important thing here. Like even the way the story, like how to pronounce knife, that story is just, it's also that moment, you know, when you realize, like, I think every child has that moment when you realize your parents aren't Superman, like your dad's not Superman. Like for me, it came when I almost like broke my dad's arm practicing karate on it. And I was like, shit, my 6 foot tall dad is like, you know, it's sort of,
Yeah.
it's not a subtle moment for me, right? But in
Yeah.
this story, there's the quietness, this child who then, but also it's about, we protect the people that we love. And I noticed that again and again, the theme here is that we protect, this child protects her father by fighting, you know, in school and being like, hey, this is not how it's pronounced. Like, you know, the K is not silent. But when she gets home, she watches him and she realizes there are so many things that she's going to know that he won't know.
Yeah.
And I think it's the same with the story in which, you know, the man who predicts everyone's marriages, the printer.
Yeah.
And that ending, and that's the brutal ending. Like it's so heartbreaking when the dad's like, yes, it's my fault that your groom didn't show up.
Yeah.
But it's also family.
Yeah.
It's what we do for family, right? Like we
What we
take
do
on
for each other.
Yeah, what we do for each other.
We often think knowledge is everything, but sometimes not knowing something
is almost better.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think as somebody who wants to know things all the time, that story was like, I had to like sit down quietly and be like, what are the things my parents didn't tell me? Like, what did dad not, you know, like, and I think that's the thing about really brilliant work, is that it makes you question your life. It makes you question small and big moments in your life. And you ask yourself, like, it makes you realign yourself as a human being. Because after I had that moment, like, what are the things people didn't tell me? I asked myself, is it better that there are things that people didn't tell me? And I think that's the sort of the beauty of this book, is that it does that. It did that for me, and I imagine it's done it for a lot of people. Like, you know,
I'm thinking also of, you know, the moment where the child discovers the mother thinks that the world is flat.
Yes. Oh,
and
yeah.
she thinks, oh, she may not know that the world is round, but you know, I don't know what it's like to come from a country where,
Yeah.
you know, I see what a bomb looks like and what it can destroy. There are things that she knows that I don't know, and we're just different people. That's all. You know, one isn't smarter than the other. Or like, what is intelligence? What's being smart? You know, those are questions that I want to wrestle with.
No, I mean, this was such a profound moment, and I love it because it doesn't. I love that the child has already thought about this. In so many stories, this moment would take place off screen. It would be like a Greek tragedy, right? Like things have taken place off screen, and then we're like sort of, or off the page, and then we're sort of living with that, or we're going through a thing, and then we have to imagine it later. I love that we get that, because again, that story is surprising, because I mean, that last page and a half, the last 2 pages, it just hits you, because it's about the disconnection, but it's about this other tragedy that's about to occur. And then you don't see it coming. Like, you see it and you don't see it. It's set up in the beginning because the mom's watching all these shows and she only knows how to act with the dad. She's almost reenacting what she knows from the television shows, right? And there's so much heartbreak in the stories, but in the way that, you know, sometimes in dramatic, but in a quiet way also, like in the quiet way that we sort of like do things. Or the moment, like, I'm sorry, it's the story in which the dad busts out a karaoke at the end and the daughter is surprised. I love the restraint at the ending, because we know why she's surprised. You don't have to tell us why she's surprised, but you know, I like.
And I don't tell if he, you know, sings it like Randy Travis, because it doesn't matter.
No, it doesn't. It's just, it matters that the daughter is there.
Yeah, the reader, it doesn't matter how he pronounces the words. Everybody, including the daughter, has front row seat now.
Yep.
And we're all longing to hear this man who boxes store furniture that no one would pay money to see. We all long to hear him take the stage and sing for us. And we forget Randy Travis, even though the story leans and builds itself out of his fame and his music and his visibility.
No, that's exactly right. Like, I mean, I got to the ending, and you know, this was one of the times when I was like, being to choke up, but I also had a big smile on my face because it's such a beautiful ending. So much has been lost, but there is hope right there. Like in that moment, like, and she's surprised. I love the word that she's surprised. Her dad just begins, he starts singing and she's surprised, and it's beautiful. I wanted to sort of like jump away from the stories for a minute and talk about the fact that, first of all, your book is going to soon be coming out as paperback on the 27th of April. And I know we were going to try some weird thing where you try to pass the book to me, but then you got it, right? Yes.
I got it.
Yes, we pulled it off.
Oh, wait.
So this is like, no, it's fine.
Okay.
Wait, no, forget it. The book is amazing. I'm so glad that it's getting this second wind, like it's getting this amazing paperback,
a new
publication, a new life. I mean, like it has a wonderful life, and I feel like this book is going to have longevity. And it's the best kind of gift a writer can get, that kind of longevity. But I also want to talk about, but this book has really good pedigree too. I feel like the first prize this book won, and please correct me if I am wrong about it. One of the stories won the Commonwealth Short Story Prize. Am I right?
No, it was shortlist.
It was shortlisted. Okay. I mean, I love that. Was it a finalist or was it like sort of semi-finalist? I don't remember anymore.
It was shortlisted out of 21, I think.
Okay.
21 with 21 others. It was the title story.
Okay. I just wanted to say that like the Commonwealth Short Story Prize, like I love that prize because of the variety of voices that come out of that prize and like just the different ways of writing. And I feel like this book has had this amazing sort of pedigree. Like there are stories that have been in the O. Henry, there are stories that have been in the Best American Required or Non-Required series, right? Like, and have won different kinds of prizes. And I wanted to ask you this, like, how long ago did you start writing these stories? What has been the journey like in that way? Because like, I know you've talked about like how you're surprised by all the success, because, success is a thing that we measure sort of like, but also when we're around other people, sort of
prizes.
Yeah, the prizes.
They are, I mean, the public thinks that when you write a good book, you win a prize, but that's not how it works.
No, not always. Not a lot of the times. Not a lot of the times.
Prizes don't happen even for good books.
Yeah.
So just thinking of that, I always think that is something that is outside of me and that I can't control. I can control the art. I can control the sentence after the sentence and the word after the word after the word. It doesn't, I know what's good. I don't need a prize or other people or a market force or sales to tell me that what I did is good. I know because I've been writing for over 2 decades, and because when I finished this book, I, just like you, I wept and I cried and I laughed in all the spots that I wanted a reader to. And I became, a reader, even though I am also the writer. When I can feel like I'm the reader, that's how I know I did a good job. Just looking back, I would have to say it took a period of like 10 years to put it together, to think of assembling and reassembling a collection, what to put in, to leave out, to kick against, to bring in that was tangential, or to create that expanded or narrowed a thought.
No, you can tell, like this book is so exquisite. I just mean, even the way that it has been curated, like from the beginning to the end, like I could read a line out from every story. We know this now. And I could like go like talk about the curation, but we've got limited time and I don't want to eat up your entire evening. But I wanted to say, you know what, congratulations again. This book deserves all the success. Especially like I think about the essay that you wrote for On Books and Their Harbors, and you talked about like the first bookseller who took your book, like took your, you know, the chapbook that you had sort of stapled together, and they held that book in that, and to have this moment where this book is everywhere now.
It's, you know, I used to staple and bind my own books, and I sold them out of my school knapsack to bookstores because I wanted to see a name like mine that's difficult to pronounce on a bookshelf in a bookstore. And there was a bookseller in Toronto who bought my little stapled things for you know, for 50 cents. And that same bookseller would also go on to sell this very book, which in Canada has been on the bestseller list for a little over 4 months.
Congratulations. That is such joy.
And to watch, you know, every time I sign a book, I always take the time to think about the person who bought it, how they found it, how they came to it. I don't take that for granted, that, you know, anybody could write, a writer can write, but none of that really means anything if you don't have a reader. You don't move readers. And over the years, I've, you know, when I won the Giller, I saw on social media every person that I took the time to write something personal and to them alone, they were posting that. The little magazines that I was in, the people who read the slush pile, they were posting their own happiness at seeing this good thing happen to me. And it also stopped being just a book, but it became like a story of a person, and then also of a country. I've seen Canadian diplomats in other, you know, in places around the world that I've never been to, like Botswana, or, you know, saying that they were proud to be Canadian, that this is a Canadian story.
And you know what, in that way it sort of honors all the people in these stories, because all the people in these stories are trying to be that. They want to be ordinary, and in doing that there is something wonderfully meta in this moment, like all of these diplomats going around and saying we're proud to be Canadian because of this one book, a book in which all the people in these books are trying to be what they are, right? Like they're trying to aspire for that. Okay, one last question before I let you go, and my question is, what are you working on now?
I'm working on a novel, but, you know, I am someone who makes things harder for myself in that I am after the surprise. I don't want to, I understand that, you know, I can lean back and coast and, you know, write the thing that perhaps a reader might expect from me. But I'm writing a novel, and I'm thinking about the differences between perspective and point of view and voice. And I want to be the architecture of that. I can't wait to get to it. That's the thing, that when you don't get to be a writer, when people start seeing you as a writer, your dance card is suddenly full. People are inviting you to talk or to opine. And so you not have time to write. And I just want to get back to that quiet, that voice that I made, and to keep making.
Well, you know what? I'm really excited, whatever it is, however the novel comes out. I would be terrified if you said you were writing a rom-com, because I know it would be a brutal one. Although I do think that Netflix should commission something from you, which is sort of like a Twilight Zone of rom-coms. Like it is, there'd be 15 minutes, and after each of those episodes, everyone must go into the bathroom and weep and like have feelings. But thank you so much,
Well,
Souvankham.
maybe because film and TV option for How to Pronounce Nice is about to be closed.
Oh my God.
My agents have been in talks with somebody who's interested in turning them into like an anthologized
Oh, wonderful. Yeah, that would be amazing. And I have to tell you, I'm going to skip the version of the story that broke my heart completely. That's so brutal. But congratulations again on all the success. Thank you so much for being here and talking to me for the Kenyon Review interview series. It has been such a pleasure. And I'm glad I finally got to see you
You
via
too.
Zoom and have a real conversation with you.
Me too. Thank you for inviting me. You know, the act of talking to a person, it is not something, you know, that happens every day now. In fact, it's dangerous. So, um, I don't take it for granted.